What is everything that goes into making a garment? And can we create a piece of clothing entirely locally? I'm going to find out. Similar to the 100-mile diet or farm-to-table movement, I've challenged myself to apply this concept to clothing and see if we can create a garment from start to finish in Edmonton and Alberta. My name is Erin, and this is the ultimate slow fashion journey. We're going to explore the entire process from farm to closet. In the previous episode, I finalized the coat design, and now we're going to head to the farm to learn more about local wool. I knew going into this project that I would be using wool because that's basically the only fiber we have here in Alberta. While we technically can grow hemp or flax fibers for linen here, we don't have a way to locally process it. But honestly, I'm happy about this because with focusing more on natural fibers in my own wardrobe, I have really grown to love wool. I think wool can have a bad reputation these days, and I also used to have a generally negative impression of wool because it can conjure images of itchy sweaters and annoying hand washing. But learning more about wool, it's actually an incredible fiber.
I am passionate about wool, and it's not just because I study textiles, but I grew up on a sheep farm in New Zealand, and so of course I was just surrounded by wool in various shapes and forms, in its dirtiest form and of course in its cleanest forms. I wouldn't say it was the reason that I moved into studying clothing and textiles, but it's certainly when I understood a lot more about textiles, I sort of really even more and more appreciated the properties and the performance of wool. It's been called nature's miracle fibre, and it's because it does have a lot of really unique properties. And wool's a very lightweight fibre, and it has natural fibre crimp. So it means it has those small waves up and down. And when those fibres are spun together in a yarn, and those yarns are then woven or knitted together into a fabric, they create all these tiny little pockets of air. It's a very insulating fibre, it's a very absorbent fibre. The unique properties that wool has is that because it really loves water, so when we of course sweat, a little bit our water vapour will be absorbed by wool fibres, but it actually has a hydrophobic outside surface. This is actually naturally water repellent. The scales, the chemistry of the outside of the fibre actually prevents water from immediately going inside the fibre. So it takes a while for it to absorb, but once it starts absorbing moisture, it can absorb a lot of water by the weight. So we sort of feel that wool can feel, when you wear it, dry, even though it could actually have absorbed quite a lot of moisture. And it's taking a lot longer for us to start to experience that kind of clammy sensation. And wool, surprisingly, for how much it absorbs, wool actually dries quite quickly. It actually releases the moisture quite quickly as well. When you stop sweating, for example, when you start to sort of dry, it will start to desorb that moisture as well. Wool is a great fabric for not smelling really strongly of our own body odour, and it's also a fabric we certainly don't need to wash it as often as we might wash some other fabrics. It doesn't really hold or retain a lot of our body odour. It may take it in initially and sort of trap it there so we don't think it's really smelly, but it can also just release it quite quickly when we're no longer sort of wearing it, and so we don't perceive that strong kind of smell on wool the way that we would with, say, polyester.
There are so many things that I love about wool. I guess, first of all, as a knitter, which is where I started in craft, what I love about wool is just the experience of working with it, the elasticity that it has. We say that it has memory. So with wool, you can knit really nice, like ribbing on your sleeves, and it'll have that nice elasticity and it'll kind of snap back to its original shape.
Wool's not actually a very strong fibre, it's actually quite a weak fibre, but what it is, it's a really resilient fibre. Because of that ability to kind of spring back and to sort of return from its kind of original position, it means that, you know, if you compress out any of those little air pockets which have been trapping air to warm you, keep you insulated, then it kind of returns and those little air pockets are recreated again. And that's what makes it great. Things like sweaters and so on as well, because it doesn't tend to bag the same way that, say, maybe a little bit of acrylic might or something, or even cotton does. Thinking of a knitted sweater that might be made out of cotton versus a knitted sweater made out of wool. Wool has that ability to kind of return when you kind of move, and it won't sort of bag or sag the same. Whereas cotton, a stronger fibre, but not very resilient, so it doesn't come back to shape the same way that wool can.
Well, there are a lot of things I love about wool, but a main one is just how comfortable it is because it handles moisture so well. You don't feel hot or cold when you're wearing wool. It's really good at regulating temperature. Also, it's great for wearing out and about. Dirt or spills really bead off of wool. It doesn't need a lot of washing, and if you spill something while you're out, you can kind of brush it off and away it goes. But I guess what I love most about it is that it is so local. Like I can't think of another textile that can happen 100% in Alberta. The sheep live well in Alberta, and the climate is excellent for sheep. And then you can shear them and have a finished garment all within 100 feet here at our property. And I think that is so special and I love it.
So the next step was figuring out where to get the wool from. Now, there are very few shepherds in Alberta who actually prioritize wool and fibre versus meat. So when I connected with Tara Klager, I knew I had to learn more about what she's doing.
I'm Tara, and I'm the shepherd at Providence Lane Homestead. We've been here since 2015. This is a small-scale regenerative agriculture farm where we focus on rare and heritage breed sheep. The two particular ones we have are Cotswolds and Border Leicesters. And so we grow them for their fleece. We do not slaughter. We are certified animal welfare approved. Border Leicesters are really exciting. They are actually such a cool breed. They are unique looking. They haven't got wool on their faces and they don't have wool on their legs, which is great because that typically is skirted out. They handle the climate well. They're originally from Northumberland in the northeast corner of England, right up at the Scottish borders. And it's just a fascinating part of the country. The weather is extreme there. These sheep did very, very well. They were long wools. They generated a tremendous amount of wool, which was at that time very valuable. And they were some of the earliest sheep that were brought to Canada with the wave of European settlement. I like wool for clothing because it's entirely biodegradable. There's a lot of hidden plastics in our clothing, but the beautiful thing about wool is it is so straightforward. It's wool. It's also very durable. Our long wool sheep, if you take their wool and prepare it in a worsted preparation or worsted process where the fibers are aligned as opposed to higgledy-piggledy in a woolen process, it is incredibly strong. So things like socks and mittens and outerwear, this is where our wool tends to really, really shine. And then finally, I think one of the things I love about it is that it's all season. You can use it in the winter, you can use it in the summer. And that's just clothes. I mean, that doesn't even talk about things like carpet and insulation and upholstery and fill and all these other things, bedding and pillows. I mean, there's so much that you can talk about when it comes to wool. It's so versatile.
Unfortunately, in Canada, wool is currently very undervalued. And speaking with people in the industry, I've learned that many farmers believe the wool has no worth. And I've heard anecdotes about how the gas to drive the wool somewhere costs more than what they'd actually be paid for it. So this is due to many factors, general demand being part of it, and also not having an efficient system in Canada of moving and processing wool, especially post-pandemic. Before, Canada used to export some wool, but when shipping ports closed and shipping costs increased, it effectively shut down wool export here. We do have some mills in Canada, but they are small scale. So across Canada, there has been a large supply of wool and nowhere for it to go.
So the history in Alberta is rich, and everybody thinks of cows, but there is a long history of sheep production in Alberta. Once upon a time, it would have been part of the sheep industry, but certainly since so much of our textile production was offshored, it has become negligible.
Australian sheep farmers have been very successful in marketing merino wool. And so we have this idea that if it's not merino wool, it's not worth anything. And we've also lost touch with the value of wool all across the planet. And it was Maddie from Custom Wool Mills that pointed it out. And she said, you know, after the war, wool wasn't considered a luxury item. It was considered something for poor people. And synthetics were the thing that were sought after. And so as time went on and synthetics became more affordable, they just became the popular solution. You could get bright colors, it wasn't scratchy. There was all sorts of reasons why it would be more attractive. And of course, as a result, it kind of rolled into faster and faster fashion and more disposable and cheaper. Wool it takes time, and it's also a much more labor-intensive type of product to work with. And these farmers, they grow their sheep for meat. They don't grow it for the fleece. And as a result, the global market for anything other than merino is basically non-existent. And so this wool is worth nothing to them. They end up having to shear the sheep regardless because that's a humane thing to do. But then if they go to try and sell it on the global market, it's worth pennies. It's not worth it for them. Sometimes they'll try and insulate barns. Maybe they'll compost a little bit of it. But sometimes they're just left to either bury it or burn it in the field.
I think it's such a shame that wool is mostly getting trashed. We have this local natural fiber that can have so many uses beyond just apparel. Think of things like stuffing furniture and carpets, which we currently use polyester and synthetic fibers for. Yet most of the wool in Canada is currently going to waste.
There is way more lamb consumed in the world as a meat than wool used as a textile. And so there is excess wool, and it can be very nice wool. The relationship of our textiles has gotten out of the sync with the relationship of our food consumption, whereas, you know, historically those things were intimately linked. If you ate lamb, you also used the wool. That's what your garments were made out of. And now with fast fashion and synthetic textiles, we get clothing from all over the world that isn't linked to what we eat and how else we are interacting with the natural world. And so that is something that people don't think a lot about, is how what we're wearing is linked to what we're eating and how those things are part of a sustainable system.
Now, another aspect that is also very exciting about wool is when done with intention, wool fiber farming can be very sustainable and play a role in regenerative agriculture. One of the reasons I found Tara's approach so interesting is she actually uses her fiber flock for sustainable land management.
We're on Treaty 7 territory, so we're really delighted to be here, and we feel so privileged and honored to be on this particular patch of Alberta. I think it all sort of came to be because I fell in love with the land, and sheep really became a tool for managing the land. If the plants come back really, really well, then I know that I used the sheep appropriately the previous grazing season. And we get a chance to grow fiber, we get a chance to grow lambs, we get a chance to conserve this heritage breed that's endangered. And it all works together in this sort of very integrated approach. They provide real feedback. Because originally this would have been grazed by bison, but by using the sheep and kind of trying to replicate what a bison would have done, I'm able to build things like water holding capacity and organic matter and do all these kinds of things to try and build some of that resilience back into the land. Part of our land is native, part of our land was a ranch many generations ago. So I'm trying to maintain a balance where our native grasses have an opportunity to grow. And once you get out of balance, it's very difficult for those native grasses to come back. I take the view that if we deal with what's going on at the ground level or below it, then we can mitigate a lot of what's happening above. Every year, I want to be better than I was the year before. So I want to see my pastures thriving. I want to see new species moving in. I want to see healthier examples. I want to see faster regrowth. When the soil tests are done, I want to see improved levels. So when you have stuff like that, even though maybe you didn't get the rain or there might have been other issues, that is huge to me.
Now, even given the comfort and beneficial properties of wool and the way that sheep can be used as part of sustainable land management and regenerative agriculture, many people don't wear wool. And one of the main reasons is because we think wool is itchy. But this is kind of an unfair generalization.
So yeah, it's actually really, really rare to have an allergy to wool. It's not an allergy. What it is, it's a sensitivity to the fibre diameter. So fine wool, and this is why with merino wool, for example, why a lot of merino wool now, we might see it in underwear, we see it in base layers, we see it in, tops. I'm wearing merino wool right next to my skin. Really, really soft, really fine, certainly doesn't make me feel itchy. That sensitivity, it isn't an allergy, it's been aggravated to something rubbing against your skin. So in the textile world, we refer to fabric prickle, and that's the prickliness of the fabric, that sensation of kind of a scratchiness or an itchiness. But the finer the fibre is, the less likely you are to perceive that as itchy.
I am not bothered by it, so I'm quite happy to wear even itchy wools next to my skin. But it is real that some people are more sensitive than others. So there are lots of ways that we can mitigate the itch factor. You can think about wearing things with like an underlayer underneath, put a long sleeve of t-shirt underneath a sweater. But just in terms of what wool we're selecting, we can also do a lot to mitigate the itchiness. So certain breeds of sheep will produce wool that's a lot itchier than others. You can look for the fine wool breeds like merino, Rambouillet, Corriedale. There's a whole world of sheep breeds, and it's mind-blowing how many different properties you can get in. We think of wool as just one type of fiber, it's wool, but there's hundreds of sheep breeds and a huge variety in the characteristics that the wools from all of those breeds have. If the itchiness factor is from an allergy, a lot of people who think that they're allergic to wool are actually allergic to the lanolin in the wool. Wool is made of keratin, which is the same thing that our hair and our fingernails are made of. So if you aren't allergic to your hair, then you aren't allergic to wool. You're not allergic to the fiber specifically, but the oil that is produced, some people do have an allergy to the lanolin. So depending on how the wool has been processed, if there's still some lanolin in it, you could be reacting to that. And if that's the problem, then alpaca could be a good option because alpacas don't produce lanolin. If you have worn one wool sweater and had a bad reaction to it, don't write off wool. There are so many different kinds of wool, different ways that it's processed, different ways of wearing it, that can all have a huge impact on how it feels.
Now, wool does need to be washed and cared for differently than other fabrics. Some superwash or washable wool is available, but these processes involve either chemically stripping or removing the scales and or coating the fibers, so the scales can't tangle together and felt easily. This is why washable wool often looks a bit shinier, but the coating they put on is a plastic, which I think defeats the whole purpose of wearing a natural fiber. So I'm not interested in the washable wools. Luckily though, with local wool, there are no superwash treatments, and even though the hand washing or the slightly different care for wool can be intimidating at first, it's not as difficult as you may think.
This is a really interesting thing about wool, that so many people are afraid of wool because they think it's difficult to wash. It's not necessarily as difficult. There are some wools and some garments that you can put through some washing machines, depending on what your setup is and what breed of sheep the wool has come from, how it's been treated. But there is a lot of wool that I put through the washing machine just fine. And for things that you don't want to be putting through the washing machine, you don't have to hand wash them very often. A sweater is often good for a yearly wash. I will bring all my sweaters out in the fall, wear them all winter, and then give them a wash before I put them back into storage for the summer. And that's it.
As a textile scientist, I would recommend that people for wool, to extend the life of your wool garments, don't wash them too often. Because the more you wash, with any garment really, the more you wash it, the more you are going to start to degrade it over time. But secondly, I would say get a wool detergent. So you can buy a wool detergent at a supermarket because wool doesn't like alkalis. And most of our detergents are alkaline. So use a wool detergent and use the hand washing or the delicate cycle on your machines, and don't use hot water. Lie it flat to dry. If you are someone who's going to say, look, I love wool, I'm going to use wool, you do need to make sure that you treat it differently than you do with many of your other garments.
My perspective on wool has really changed over the years. I used to not wear it at all. I thought it was itchy and was also concerned about the animal welfare aspects of the industry. But learning more about the properties of wool and fiber farming, and through actually wearing wool, it's become my favorite fiber to wear. The regenerative agriculture aspects I find fascinating, and I think there's exciting possibilities with holistic, environmentally conscious approaches to farming. And as long as you properly care for it, thermal regulation, odor properties, and sustainability of wool are really outstanding compared to most fibers. And yet, collectively, we are wearing primarily plastic clothing made from synthetic, petrochemical-derived fabrics, which we know are shedding little microplastics into our environment. Meanwhile, wool here is getting trashed and burned and going to waste. And I hope that we can start to value natural fibers more. So the coat project did run into a hiccup at this point. I really wanted to use Tara's wool for my coat. However, I learned that because she has long wool sheep, the length of her wool cannot currently be processed in Alberta. She is doing some testing with a local mill, but it's unfortunately not ready at this time. So I needed to find a local option that can also be spun in Alberta. And fortunately, Shannon from Traceable Textiles has some wool from a fin sheep flock that actually helps trim the grass of the city park in Fort Saskatchewan. So that's what we'll be using instead. Fin sheep, as the name suggests, were originally from Finland. The breed is hundreds of years old. Fin wool used to be very important for clothing. It is a medium fineness, but still quite soft, and it's known for its lovely luster. So we should be able to get a really beautiful fabric from it.